So let's just hop into the agenda then. So the big items from last week to get kind of started for folks is that we've been working on a version 2.0 of the security compliance guidelines document that we worked on last year and including this year. The Let me just bring up the sheet for you guys so you can see it. There we go. So last week, Ulysses, so some background for folks who are new. OpenJS has been working on a set of compliance guidelines for its projects. This is also meant to be guidance for other ecosystem projects as well, but the primary audience are OpenJS hosted projects. And the idea is to create a minimum baseline of security recommendations that we track over time that are ideally the most valuable and reasonable things that we could ask projects to do. The intent around this was to not overwhelm folks, but instead to give them what is theoretically a pick list of things that they can do to improve the security posture of their projects. We've gone through a few iterations so far as we've incrementally had projects go through the surveying process to answer questions around the compliance guidelines. And we're going to have a pretty big, this work led to a number of additional ideas and initiatives. And I think given how many new folks are here, Ulysses, would you mind kind of walking us through what you've been working on to follow up on this idea of the compliance guidelines and around tracking and automation?
Yeah, I think I was muted. Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, I think I can showcase a little bit what we have been working on. Let me see. Yeah, let me show you this initiative basically and where we are. Let me share my screen for those who doesn't. I'm supposed to be able to share my screen, but somehow not.
Do I have some permission issue?
I mean, it's weird because I can technically record the session, but not sharing my screen. So that's like weird permissions.
Okay, let me see what is going on.
Make him co-host, perhaps.
Yeah, it looks like, let's see. Yeah, it's weird.
Maybe something in my computer. Can be. I updated Zoom this morning, so that might be one of the reasons.
I'll make you here your co-host now. That was a good idea, Robin.
Yeah, somehow. Okay, I see now the share button. Okay, yeah, was weird that I didn't saw that before. Okay, let me see. So my screen, desktop one. Okay. So yeah, for those who doesn't know, let me see. You should be able to see like Open Pathfinder website.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Let me also open the chat in the site so I can send you the links as well. So yeah, basically, we have the Open Pathfinder initiative, which originally started as a way to try to move these discussions that we have on the spreadsheets into something more more concrete and more like a dashboard web kind of thing that we can run among the projects and so on. So basically at this stage, we have two different projects. One is Vision Board itself, which is basically the tool that we use today to try to visualize this information. So we have two different things. We have the checklist that basically is what Adam says at the beginning. That's the security compliance guide. Basically, you can think this as a playlist in Spotify, and basically inside of every of these playlists, we have the amount of checks that we have. So we have been discussing about these checks for a long, long time. This is the implementation for the version 1. So for example, in case that you want to have a respond to external vulnerability response in less than 40 days, for example. So you have here the information on how we are doing these calculations, in the case that is automatically or not, and how we are trying to collecting this information. So basically you have here all the information about these checks. This currently is in review. Adam and myself, we are working on the version 2 of this. So maybe some of these checks and so on will be reviewed and change it or remove it or update it or merge it as well for the next version. But yeah, that's more or less as part of moving these ideas from the spreadsheet into a document we can see this version that might be more helpful. Also, we generate also the dashboards in the way that you can interact with them a little bit. I can show you that maybe in a moment. I can point you out to some statical HTML files that we have. We are right now in a process of migrating from this to a dynamic server, so you can have more information. But aside of the vision board, which is the tool that we so far have been used to tracking the evolution of the project, one of the problems that we saw was like it's very hard sometimes to do like to reduce the time to mitigation, because it's hard to do all the changes. For example, let's say that you want to do branch protection on all your repositories, right? So you change the policy at a global level on GitHub, and then you have to go in many cases one by one in all the repos and make the changes. And if you have, for example, many repositories or several organizations together, that's the case of Express, for example, is a really painful experience, right? So we end up starting to prototype in a different tool that is for the Sphere, which basically is going to allow us to use run just policies. So you have a bunch of policies available. Right now we have only one because we are starting to test it, but basically you can apply policies and you can have these as a bash script as well. So you can define your policies as organization level, and you can just already kind of mitigate these kind of things more easily. Yeah, I don't know if this was the best intro I did of the tool, honestly, but yeah, for those who are very lost on this, you have this 10 minutes video here when you can see these both tools working together, and it's the state of the art. So if you run the project locally and so on, you will get the same results. Basically, this, let me share you also the link here for those who are not aware of the project so far. And yeah, basically in this video, you can see the demo on 10 minutes on how that works. But yeah, basically, let me show you here. When you run this, you end up having this dashboard. Basically, that's what I was mentioning before, where you can see the results, the alerts, all the tasks, and all the things that you have on your project based on the checks that we run. Yeah, that was I think super fast presentation. But yeah, anything concrete that you want me to cover as well, Adam, or anything that I missed?
Yeah, that was great, Ulysses. Thank you. So the idea is that we've created this compliance guide, but rather than some of these questions are inevitably going to have to be manual, and there's going to be some iteration, some regular cadence of when we review and discuss, when we go and reach out to projects and update the guide based on and resurvey them. But the idea is that as many checks as possible over time, we should be able to automate. And that way it provides like a continuous view, not just for OpenJS, but for the project themselves on how they are adhering to the guide. From a technology perspective, just something to add for some context, under the hood, this uses OpenSSF's scorecard, but also it goes beyond that for other sorts of questions that are beyond the scope of scorecard at the moment. But there's a lot of inspiration from scorecard originally in this. And I think Ulysses, you're also collaborating with the scorecard team, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I'm helping them actually. I have developed time ago together with Rafael and the security working group in Node.js two tools. One was the Node.js, the scorecard visualizer and the scorecard monitor. So we basically allow any project just to track the scorecard results over the time, and you can check the differences on the scoring between different commit hashes and so on. So you can track evolution and see how you make your changes in real life, on real time. So basically, if you are like working on this on a cadence of every 2 weeks or something like that, you can really see the improvement and see the policies in place. So that has been helpful for Node.js scale. So I think it's helpful at project that has multiple maintainers. If you are a solo maintainer, it might be a little bit tricky because the tool can be a little bit complex. But yeah, we use that and doesn't have any dependencies, nothing, run just as a GitHub action and store everything like in 2 or 3 files on your repository.
Robin.
Yeah, I love this, and we're featuring it on the security page. I just wanted to clarify, is this your personal project and staying a personal project? Are you, how are you officially affiliating it with the foundation? Of course, we want to promote it, so.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Do you mean the ones that they did for the OSSF or the Open Pathfinder thing and Vision Board and so on?
You donate it to the OpenSSF, is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean
Okay.
the scorecard monitor actually has been donated. Took me a
Okay.
while to finish all the paperwork, so you can, I mean, paperwork and so on, because it was required some changes, and also we need to address some changes in the policies and licenses and so on. But yeah, we donated. I think the same idea will go with the vision board and so on when they are on the state that are mature and we are happy with them. I probably just move them to the foundation directly or something like that. I don't know. As we are exploring a lot and we are moving a lot in different paths, so it depends on how we evolve over the time. But yeah, probably the idea is going to be donated when it's solid,
Okay.
or just make a fork with that version stable for the foundation or something like that. I mean, right now the project is, I know we are trying to find new contributors as well and trying to make it more sustainable. I mean, there are a lot of open ways, but yeah, so far has been like evolved as part of the foundation. So makes sense to be part of the tooling that the foundation can use, or even have the ownership. For those who are curious, we have in the Open Pathfinder, we covered also a little bit on the history of the project. So you can see also early demos with Adam and with Robin and with all the people involved and how we are getting feedback from this. Actually, the way that we're iterating the tool aside of working with Adam right now is on the security working group for the Node.js project. I try to do some demos there and try to collect feedback from Rafael and from Michael and from the rest of the team. And based on that, we evolve the dashboard and see. So the idea is to see if really other maintainers, not just myself, find this useful and how we can make it better. So it's the same process that we follow in the past for the scorecard monitor and for the visualizer.
Okay. Let's make sure it has its own special day in the sun to promote it. We can partner with OpenSSF on a blog.
That will be fantastic.
Okay.
Also, we can try to engage with new contributors and so on and split tasks. And yeah, we tried in the past to do this, and it was a nice experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we could include it as part of the Open JS report. So instead of creating a blog post about all the achievements, we could create a second one explaining the project and calling for contributors.
Yeah, great idea.
Ulysses, how did you end up figuring out the scorecard at scale thing where
I'm still work in progress. I mean, I'm thinking on this. So far, I have been focused more on migrating the CLI and so on using a API. So that part is kind of sorted out. There for the scale of the scorecard, not sure yet how you're going to make it. I mean, we have been some discussions nice around the idea. So that might be one of the ways, because I mean, for those who don't know, there are some challenges on how we calculate the scorecard. I mean, if you want to calculate the scorecard of the project, you normally every repository has to include like a pipeline specifically that reports proactively to the OSSF, and that's nice because then you can get some additional information that normally you don't get. For example, branch protections and stuff like that you only can get if you have some kind of admin access level read or something like that on the GitHub tokens. And you might see that only at the repository level. So when the OSSF run the cron job that collects from many projects, that's another way to get this information. You lost this data, basically, because you cannot collect it. So you lost some points from the scoring. So that's why we normally try to promote this on every project. So that's cool. But the thing is, if you don't have this pipeline and you don't report proactively, one of the things that we tried to do with Vision Board was to just share with us like a token, so we can just basically run this as using the official Docker images under, I mean, as a process and just collect the feedback. The problem is these images are consuming a lot of tokens because you need to do a lot of calls to the GitHub API. And recently we ran out of tokens in terms of personal access token from the GitHub because there are some limits per hour and so on. So we are dealing with this scale problem, and Tobias was super nice and was helping me a lot because he solved this at different level for a different, bigger scale than myself. So that was an interesting discussion. And that's on one of the big blockers that we have for this version 2 of the vision board is going to be how we scale this digestion of information and collection, basically. But yeah, this and moving to an HTTP interface that works properly like an API.
I didn't like follow up like 100% on our chat, but did you get all the data that you need from us?
I get it from the binary. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, nice. Okay. Yeah, I can sort of I think most of you have seen this. I can show it very quickly. Can I screen share? Yep. We run like this is OpenJS. It's the OpenJS Foundation's GitHub organization. And the challenge here is to get like all the scorecards up to date running, right? And this is the data that Ulysses was talking about, where we want to have these scorecards run at scale. So if you need scorecard data at scale, you just send me a DM.
Tobias, this is the first time I've seen that. Would you mind going into a little bit more detail?
Oh, I think I've shown this to you guys earlier. This is it's a dashboard that we make for large supply networks, right? Where you have three different kinds of assets here. The first one is the repositories. Here we have the repositories from the OpenJS, and here we have the dependencies. Okay, so the full nodes are organizational assets, the perimeter, and the non-filled nodes are the dependencies. And then you see these letters, these are the contributors. And then we have our vulnerabilities here, which are these like smaller nodes. And what this dashboard essentially does is you can find critical risk, where critical is defined as many repositories depend on it, like it being a person, right? So here's the Node.js organization. That's obviously very critical because it has like access to a lot of repositories. And then you have your TC39, which is also like very critical. And then sometimes you have people that are also quite critical, right? Because they're maintaining a lot. Like Jordan, for example, criticality would be insane if it would be on this map. And yeah, that's that dashboard, and you can browse through it and find things that are of high risk to a specific organization, like this dependency here.
Oh, this is awesome. Cool. So any questions on this before moving on to some action items and next steps and feedback on this?
Yeah, so my message is basically like we don't have a great API for this data yet. But Ulysses has found, which is why I didn't like offer it like earlier if you need it. I wanted to have like a nice, well-documented API. But this is kind of in the backlog right now. We're like working mostly on the AI agent. So if you need this data, like Ulysses, you probably like made some pretty good parser, where you can like get this entire graph and all the metrics, like all the risk metrics and criticality metrics and whatever you need, like from us directly.
This is super awesome, dude. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's super neat. I love graph data. I love graph databases just automatically, and I love seeing like real world use cases for them. So this is amazing work. Thank you.
Yeah, we had this like super like interesting conversation about knowledge graphs. I think a while ago. We have to pick up the thread at some point. Adam, that was really nice. Yeah, I remember it.
Oh yeah. Cool. So kind of where we are on next steps in terms of the compliance guide itself is Ulysses and I met last week, had a really good conversation on on certain updates. He gave based upon the Node.js team's feedback and his experiences also working on Open Pathfinder. He gave some really good detailed feedback on the current compliance guide, and that's linked in that you can find that in this document that I linked earlier in the Ulysses feedback for version 2.0. I have my own comments in there, and so if especially Jordan and Chris and Raphael, since you've been more involved day to day, if you would not mind going through that list yourself and sharing your perspectives, like we did when we built version 1.0, that would be super great. I can follow up offline in chat too, just to make sure that we can keep track of this. But yeah, I'd appreciate you all taking a look at this and giving some feedback to the comments in there. I think there are a number of issues in there that are like that. There's some really good points about removing items or radically refactoring some of them, perhaps. Some of them you'll see in the comment history as well that there's some discussion on how much we should have something, like whether or not we should have an item in there, even if we're not able to automate it, or whether or not we should have an item in there, even though it's not an expectation, but a recommendation. And recommendations were controversial when we first made them. So, and that's why there's that recommendation section to begin with, rather than expectations. So another look through would be really great. The version 1.1 update was a really small one, just focusing on some cleanup and reorganizing things a bit and adding NPM items. But this one's going to be a little bit more substantial so that it can get aligned with Ulysses' work. Another thing to keep in mind around that document that we also talked about. And here, let me share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about here. Two new things in this document for those who were there for version 1 is this idea of context and qualifier. So before we had the domains, and that worked all right. But what wound up happening is that a lot of different tools, guidance for different tools wound up being mixed in together, and there wasn't an easy way to see all the things for GitHub or all the things for other tools together, or things that are not related to GitHub, but more at the project level and governance. So the context column now provides that kind of information so that you can see everything that's related to GitHub, everything's related to NPM, and this kind of catch-all right now of dev infra and projects. The other item here is that in earlier versions, we had some qualifiers, like this one only applies if a team has like 3 or more maintainers and things like that. Instead of having that built into the string text of the item title itself, like there was in the past, we made a column out of it. And one of the things that came out of this was that just through prototyping, came up with a number of different qualifiers, more than there were originally. And after discussing things with Ulysses a little bit, there's some of these qualifiers make organizing content in the context of the website and Open Pathfinder a little challenging. And so it would be great to get some feedback from y'all also on how the qualifiers work and what you all think of them. And you can just put comments in the document itself, in the sheet itself, so that we can just get some feedback on it. I think Ulysses has some good points about maybe compressing these a little bit. And so I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts as well on this. So finally, on the compliance guide itself, one of the other action items that I took from our discussion is that.
Sorry, I
Oh, go
want to
ahead.
give some quick feedback. I think
Oh, yeah.
the qualifier and the context is like outstanding. That's something that so often is being forgotten, where hey, security context matters as well. Where this is like if you think about it, when you wanted to automate some parts of the implementation, it's like super important. Or if you want to delegate tasks effectively, so like big kudos for that one. Um, More like a long-term or a strategic question is, are you aware of the OpenSSF baseline being rolled out, or at least there's rumors that it's supposed to be rolled out across like tens of thousands of repositories in the Linux ecosystem? And if you're aware of it, how does it relate to it, or does it relate to it?
I can't say I'm familiar with it actually, so if you mind giving a quick summary, that'd be great.
Okay, so OpenSSF security baseline is, I think, quite a related project to what you have been working on. There's primarily Eddie Knight from Sonatype and Christopher Robinson are driving this. I think in a nutshell, you have different tiers of readiness and maturity, open source security maturity. And I think projects are supposed to kind of like self-assign one of the maturities levels that they want to like strive for. And yeah, then I think the idea is to automate most of the baseline requirements, the baseline security requirements, and then roll it out at a large scale. This has been married with a compliance initiative in the context of the European Union Cyber Resilience Act, where a lot of the things that we're talking about will be, kind of like a great to have for enterprises who want to prove, hey, my open source components are very secure and I chose like good security components. So this is kind of, these two streams are essentially merging, where baseline is more a security initiative and it's now becoming a security and compliance initiative. Where, yeah, if you want to learn more about that, I'm a co-chair of the policy special interest group where a lot of this is being discussed, and you can like ask all the questions there on baseline and how it's supposed to become a standard.
Okay, cool. This is actually great insight, dude. Thank you very much for the update on this.
Yeah, happy to.
So yeah, I can take the action item to kind of go through this and see, bring back to the group some ideas on how this relates to the compliance guide itself, for sure. The compliance guide today has references to like KPEC and CWE and some of the OpenSSF and other sources for where we originally got the ideas for those items. But this is great. So I'll look at what we can do about incorporating this, at least for references, into what we have right now. So thank you, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's a, like I'm happy to carry around like messages between Eclipse, OpenSSF, OpenJS, and Apache. So if there's a specific, thing that you would like from a policy perspective or whatnot, then I can put it on the agenda like next week.
Yeah, actually, that would be really awesome if you wouldn't mind.
So would it be like, hey, policy group, let's review the security compliance guide from OpenJS, or would there be something more useful?
I think going through this in a little bit more detail to understand how we could use it with the compliance guide would be good. So I
Mhm.
think I can go do my own digging, but I think if you have any like specific thoughts because you're familiar with this, that would be awesome to review.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll try to look into it and come up with some good suggestions there.
All right, awesome, dude. Thank you. Cool. So with that, coming back to the docs, let me go back and share my screen again. So one of the other items that Ulysses and I were talking about that would help, especially that became more obvious when working with the Node.js team and also building out Open Pathfinder, is a discrete why, and what kind of why that particular item is relevant and what it's hoping to do, kind of like why it's there. So there's references to various sources and OWASP and OpenSSF's documentation that has this information, but it requires the user to dig right now. And so what we're also going to be doing is adding a column that pulls out that information and gives a really quick 1 to 3 sentence summary of what threats and risks that item is attempting to protect against, and why it's important to implement it. Since we get questions sometimes on, is this actually valuable? And going through that in the intense detail for every row and having to dig through the documentation through that is not a great experience. So having that summarized there is going to be, I think, a really big improvement as well for consumption for folks. Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, so just to kind of show you all really quick where the feedback is. This is Ulysses had some suggestions for removals or changes. I commented on each of these, just kind of how we did the last time. So if you wouldn't mind going through them yourselves and providing some input and feedback, that would be super awesome and would really help us get to like a really good consensus for 2.0, where maybe we can slow down the iteration of changes a little bit and come to something a little bit more stable. Rapid iteration was expected when we first built this, because when we built it, we kind of built it before we encountered actual projects and surveyed them. But now that we've done some surveying, we've learned a lot from that, as we expected. So that's why this version is being labeled a 2.0, because it's going to be a pretty substantial change from 1.0. So appreciate your all's feedback and help with this, and your all's thoughts, especially those who are new going through the list. It'd be great to get like a new perspective and new eyes on this. So really appreciate that. All right, cool beans. Let's see.
We want to talk about line 50 for a second. We have
sure.
We have Ulysses. Jordan, I think, he also had a pretty strong opinion on GitHub Action Security, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, pinning actions to a SHA is, I think, even more established than it was when we first expressed that feedback that it's a bad idea for security. It makes it easy to obfuscate the actual, like what you're actually targeting and so on. There's like a workaround in that if you use something like renovate or dependabot, it will update it to a hash and then put the tag in a comment, so that that's sort of the half workaround. But it would be much better for if GitHub came up with some way to like have a separate lock file for actions, so that your workflows all depended on them properly to a tag or a range, and then you could still control how they incremented. But lacking that, it's just the other thing is that is only possibly beneficial if it's a workflow which, if compromised, could cause damage. And a workflow that has no secrets cannot cause damage, and most CI workflows have no secrets in open source, at least. So like, it's actively harming usability for no benefit in those cases, and questionable benefit, I would argue, in the few cases where there are secrets.
Interesting. So, okay, I mean, there's definitely more nuance than telling people like everybody just pin hashes now.
Exactly.
It's definitely more nuance, but we do agree that the TJ Actions hack was basically facilitated by pinning a tag and not a hash. The one that
I mean, yes, but it could have been executed with pinning a hash too, because if the attacker had just put a convincing enough update out, nobody goes and audits the source code when their dependency updating tool bumps the hash. They would just merge that PR, and the attack would be the same. It would have just been more easily revertible.
If you pin the hash, you get to review it, and it's not like directly going into your CI/CD.
You get to review the hash change, but I'm saying effectively, like, The percentage of people that go beyond that and review the code that's changing underneath that hash is effectively zero. And so, like, if they have the ability to edit the repo, then they have the ability to sneak code into repos, like, almost as easily.
So what you're saying is,
Like, it's the same thing as if I get publish access on a package
Mhm.
and people are depending on it with a lock file, and I
Mhm.
publish a malicious patch release,
Mhm.
almost virtually nobody is going to go look at my patch release. They're just going to accept the update when it's prompted. Right. And so their remediation might be easier because they can just revert that update. But the actual likelihood of the malicious code getting in the first place is identical.
Yeah, I would say it makes a gigantic difference if you have everybody just, being required to review the changed hash and then say, yeah, okay, accepted, I merged it, just in terms of how quickly the supply chain attack spreads. So for context, there was a supply chain attack on targeting Coinbase, which was exploiting exactly this rule that we're talking about right now,
Mhm.
where the GitHub action didn't pin a hash, but a version number, and then the GitHub action was compromised, and then a malicious release was pushed, and it had the same tag, and that led to 23,000 repositories. Some of the folks, affected, I talked to and worked with, so that wasn't fun because they didn't get any kind of like, okay, something changed upstream. There was like
Yeah.
nothing. It was just, Snap on a holiday basically. And I think that's something that you don't get if you pin your hashes. But I think Chris, maybe you have also like a opinion on that.
Yeah, and we've discussed this a lot in this group and in others. Ulysses and I just posted a link to the Express decision on this, and I think it's a good document that captures the trade-offs involved here. Jordan is absolutely right that most people are not going to review. They're going to see a dependent bot update and go, oh, this is update for security, CI is passing, therefore let's just go ahead and merge it. That's not great. Our policy in the Express org is that if we are pinning anything, we will be those things do need to be reviewed. People must sign off on them. But the recommendation is particularly where actions do not involve like secrets or supply chain risk, like actions that would be publishing artifacts, for example, that we would explicitly not pin. There is no panacea here. I know that in security and with many things in programming, we like to have really cheap, easy wins and rules where we can go, yes, always do this. It's clearly the benefit, but in this, it's always going to be a trade-off. And so we cannot be not responsible to just universally say always pinning is always better because it's not true. It's
Yeah,
trade-off.
yeah. So I think that's like the decision here is great and captures a lot of the nuance that we just had, right? So it's not saying don't pin hashes, it's just like for workflows that access secrets, publish artifacts, pinning commit hashes is justified. I think that's a really good policy. One thing I want to add here is this reasoning of people are not going to review it anyways is, I feel, very dangerous. If you kind of like just +1 that for pull request review or anything, then like software supply chain security doesn't make any sense anymore. Because if the argument is okay, like nobody would review it anyways, I think that's
So that's
people's review.
but empirically, that is human behavior. In other words, nobody reads terms of service either. So what that tells you is that I agree with you that that's dangerous. The way to make it not dangerous is not to try to overwrite human behavior and get people to read through everything.
Mhm.
It's to create a circumstance where it's the easy thing is the right thing. And the the it's the same idea with like Android and Deno have that thing where they like ask you each time. They'll be like, hey, do you want to give this thing permission to do this thing? And then they keep asking, and people get fatigued from that, and then they just click allow all forever after
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so in other words, it's this dovetails with my general opinion that in security false negatives are better than false positives, because false positives create notification fatigue and undermine, to create that danger you're talking about. And so, like, there should be a better solution, but it is like, without GitHub creating one, the best we've got is the, like, use your dependency updating tool to update the SHA and put a hash, and or put a comment with the actual source of it and so on. And that's, that's a bit of a frictiony workaround for, and it's the trade-off is probably worth it for workflows that have, privilege, right? Like publishing, committing, things like that. But most workflows don't. And so for those, there's just like no point. Like, who cares if your linter breaks suddenly on a weekend, right? Like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You're just gonna fix it when you get back to it. But like, your publisher, definitely that matters. And so that's, like, I think the ethos that this Express doc, I think, captures pretty well.
And I think that's the most important part, right? So where that specific ethos and that nuance, where let me try to get it across. Like, all the things that you just said are right, and all the things that you just said are empirically and realistically what I experience in security since I work in
Right.
security. So this whole mechanism of attention economics, right? Where nudging and attention economics is what you said in terms of false negatives don't create alert fatigue, so they're lesser evil.
Mhm.
That's very important. The only thing I want to note is this: nobody's going to review it anyways, because the easy thing has to be the secure thing. And if we don't get security to be easy, then it doesn't make any sense anyway. This is a massive hammer. So you can, like, literally any security policy that creates non-zero friction would just like fail that test, and you would just say, okay, let's not have the security policy because it creates non-zero friction, so let's get rid of it. And I think I just want to point out that you know what kind of like sizable argument you have there when you say, like, hey, like, nobody reviews hashes anyway, so nobody reviews anything anyways. That's a very massive argument, while it's empirically right, and I agree with the trajectory of it.
Yeah, I
Chris.
mean, I wish it wasn't true, for the record.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
go ahead,
I'm a
Chris.
we're dealing with humans, and I'll tell you, humans are the worst.
I mean, like, there's different humans, right? So if you look at NixOS and like these people, they're just like love checking hashes.
Yeah,
It really depends on what community you're in. There's like different people in the world.
Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had my hand up for an earlier item in here, but staying on this topic, I wanted to talk about Raphael's question in the chat.
Mm.
Uh, so it's asking, why are commit hashes opaque and harder to audit and easy to misuse, such as referencing malicious fork? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question of why, but I'm
I
also
can.
wondering, when you say Dependabot does the audit, what do you mean?
Okay, let me provide some context. We do pin all of our actions in Node.js, and we also the Dependabot updates the version every security release, every release. We receive an pull request, we review that, and the pull request description also show the diff between the previous change and the new, not just the commit SHA. So we could review it very easy. And also, if there is a security update, we get the update. And the document you both link is mentioning that pinning disables automatic updates, which is not. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly. Maybe you are mentioning that if you pin it to the latest, every time you run the action, it gets the latest source code. But I believe the Pendabot or any other automation bot would do that by default, right?
No, it will not do it by default. You have to review it, you have to merge it, and if you're pinning, you should actually review what changes are actually associated with the commit hash. You should make sure that it's not via a malicious fork. And but you're right, if you're using semantic version tags, which is what we're recommending by default, it will get security updates automatically. So if overnight there was some vulnerability patched, the next time that action runs, it will run with the patched code.
And
so Sorry.
And for Express, it does make sense to it's hard to say, but it seems that you are like giving away a part of security in case of someone take lead of that action and overwrite the commit tag, and then you fetch a malicious code, then pinning the action. I just wondering why this decision was made for Express, just to understand if we should evaluate the same for Node.js.
I mean, that's what this document intends to capture. The document intends to illustrate what is the context behind this, what are the trade-offs between pinning and not pinning, and the risks associated, and why we do this, and what are the consequences of it. I think it's important to also remember that this decision doesn't say always do one and never do the other. It just says by default, use semantic version tags, and that for workflows that access secrets or publish artifacts or have privileged scopes, that you can use commit hashes if you think that's the best for that particular case, and that if you are using pinning, then you need to be manually verifying commit hashes and changes as part of when those get updated. So
Yeah.
the decision just acknowledges the reality that these things are trade-offs.
Yeah.
There is no perfect answer. Each depending on whichever way you go, you get some benefits and you get some risks. There's risk in both cases. We can argue about which risks are greater, but we can't say that there is zero risk in one and not the other, and therefore one is always universally better.
Yeah, I think this is you guys are all hitting on good points. We're almost out of time, so I'm just gonna kind of sum up and talk about next steps really quick. So next step for folks that are interested, I think we've had a really good discussion here on we spent a little time getting everybody up to speed with new faces. Really appreciate those new faces listening, and hopefully there's some interesting problems or thoughts for you all that you'd like to contribute on. So I think the next step here for the discussion on 2.0 is to review the comments in the tab that I was just screen sharing from Ulysses and and please add your own thoughts. And I'll try to organize that, the discussion we have offline this week into some decision points that we can make in the meeting next week. In addition to Tobias bringing his topic in to bring us up to speed on OpenSSF's baselines and how we might be able to leverage those as well. Let's see, a couple other items just to touch on them really quick. Robin, just FYI, I'll be in the CPC meeting tomorrow, so we can discuss the two policy documents. There's the GitHub policy and also continuity policy, and there's also the NPM policy that we were talking about. So we can go into a little bit more detail on that. I'll be attending that tomorrow, and we can discuss there, an update there, and then see what else is needed, if anything, from this group, and we can put it on the agenda for next week if there's anything for that. And
Actually,
also just
tomorrow is a working session,
Oh,
so
okay.
we may not have, the full turnout. So I think for a broader discussion, maybe drop some initial notes in the issues, and then say that we'll be discussing it in the next CPC, which is next Tuesday.
Is there
Awesome.
already an issue for it?
Yeah, there is, and
There is.
the
And it's
last
marked with
comment
TC.
is need Rudd's input. So
Yeah.
Okay, as long as that's
Cool.
got the TC agenda label on it, then
yeah.
definitely cover
Cool.
it.
We'll do.
Yeah.
Chris, you had your hands up again?
Yeah, it was, if you're done with the stuff you wanted to talk about, I had question, but why I originally raised my hand on a thing on the spreadsheet from way back, but You had more to cover
Yeah.
here
Is
first.
there anything else, folks, that we want to make sure we talk about next week? All righty. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on the spreadsheet on I didn't look at everything, but what the first thing that I saw there to remove some things on the multi-factor authentication from Ulysses' comments about this being difficult to or impossible to verify. And so we want to remove a good guidance but that move it where?
Yeah, I think the way to think about Ulysses' initial, I'm sorry to speak for Ulysses, but so please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was like really Ulysses' feedback was from both the Node.js perspective and also from the Open Pathfinder perspective. And so I think whether or not we remove things is something that has a lot of discussion to it, but I think going forward, the idea is just to discuss the feedback of it, and that way we can make decisions in future meetings. Ulysses.
Yeah, you were talking like about the multi-factor impersonation defense one, or because there are several with multi-factor.
There is an item on, I mean, there's a couple of them, but there's one, for example, on, enable MFA on stuff. We're out of time, and I think I've got to go to another meeting,
Okay.
but we can continue the discussion. I think that's what Rudd was getting at.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks, folks. Happy Monday. Have a great week. Take
Hey,
care.
Ulysses, do you have time to meet now for the other meeting?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
cool.
can.
All
Yeah.
right, let's talk about
Ulysses,
Malter and all that.
Ulysses, are you going to Express? Are you guys going to the Express meeting?
Yes, but we will be discussing
Yeah, private.
an embargoed undisclosed vulnerability. So you are cordially not invited. Sorry.
Is the link still public though? I mean,
It is the security working group meeting, but I was planning on using it for a closed session for people who have a triage team, because
That's actually a good one.
we've got to publish 2 CVEs
Yeah.
that are currently undisclosed. Jordan's welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Actually,
apologies.
that
I like to be
meeting-
radically inclusive, but it is important in security to maintain the embargo for
I
undisclosed
mean,
things.
hey, it's all good. You might wanna like not use the same link then, so no one kind of.
Yeah, we'll figure it out, or maybe we'll have 2. Maybe some people can do working group, and then some can split off into the dealing with this Mulcher thing that we've been putting out for like a year now.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's one thing. Technically, the security working group meeting was last Monday, and this is because there's a mismatch in the calendar. So, yeah, that's why we have like this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird to
Maybe
follow.
there's
We
not
can
actually
fix
a
that.
meeting, but we were gonna, I don't know.
We're
I
going
love
to use that
Tobias's
meeting
face
anyway.
just there. That was fantastic.
I'm fully confused and you're like,
Me too.
I'm
Me-
perfect confusion. That's like perfect confusion. Okay. Have a nice week, everyone.
Awesome. Take care,
Take
folks.
care,
Thank you.
everyone. Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye-bye.